Welcome to another edition of the Claws Out podcast. Today we have an edition on what I don't believe is a very good day for the West Tigers. I'm joined by our regular Steve Stratton, but I'm also joined by Gary Barnier. Thank you for joining us today, Gary.
Thanks, mate.
Now, before we get started on the news that is breaking as we are recording now, there's been a little bit of talk around the rally that's coming up this weekend to save the West Tigers, that it is a little bit of a push for Balmain to return to the NRL. Steve has a couple of things he wants to mention about that before we get started in the main pod.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. I just want to address the misinformation and fake news that's out there that's increasing to hit our socials. You know, as you know, we combined all our social groups together and formed West Tigers Unite, and we've been out there hitting the socials pretty heavy. But there's a couple of groups out there that seem to be wanting to spread a lot of misinformation and fake news. Firstly, there's a group of old Magpies relics, you know, really from the 70s, that seem to want to chip in for every single comment we make and give their version of events. They've been described as being stale, frail, male and pale, which concerned me because I thought they were talking about Gary initially, but apparently not, it's them. But their main beef is that we're trying to bring the Tigers back, the Balmain Tigers, that we hate the Magpies and it's all about Balmain versus West. And it's got nothing to do with that. You know, if we look, Gary Barnier here, historically he was from Western Suburbs. Gary Watson from Balmain, myself from Balmain, Kelly Hollis, who's hugely involved in this, she was from West Magpies as well. You know, we're cross-represented from the old clubs. We have no intention of an agenda of wanting to bring the Balmain Tigers back at the expense of Western Suburbs. We are West Tigers. Secondly, there's a couple of individuals out there that have taken our graphics and turned them into a Bring Back Balmain graphic. The West Tigers Unite one, which talks about the rally, talks about a united West Tigers. They've manipulated that graphic and turned it into Bring Back Balmain. Again, we are not about bringing back Balmain. That is not our agenda. It's not our intention. It's not our purpose. So let's be really clear. What we are advocating for and what we are stating as strongly as possible is that we want a thriving West Tigers. We want independent governance. We want honest governance. We want governance solely dedicated to the success of West Tigers. We want governance that stays out of the way and doesn't interfere. We want the HBG board, as it stands, gone. We want an administrator appointed to govern over our club. We want a winning West Tigers team and organisation. That's what it's all about.
Thanks, Steve. It's all about West Tigers, not Magpies, not Balmain. Everything
Absolutely.
is West Tigers.
Yep.
Now, as I mentioned at the start of this podcast, there's news breaking right now as we're recording this podcast. Reports have started to emerge in the last hour that Shane Richardson has resigned from his position as CEO of the West Tigers. That changes what we had planned a little bit here today, but I think we've got the perfect person here to talk through corporate governance at a high level for us. We're joined by Gary Barnier, as I said earlier. Gary, what's your immediate reaction to these reports that are coming out about Shane Richardson this afternoon?
I think Shane leaving is a terrible thing. I think the things that have unfolded over the last week are just extraordinary, and for this to end in the dismissal of the board and Shane leaving is just extraordinary. And, you know, as I come here today, what I wanted to do and what I want to do is talk about where to from here, because it's easy to grieve what's happened and, you know, I'm grieving it, but at the same time, where are we going to go? So if you don't mind me talking about that for a couple of minutes.
I'm very happy. The floor is yours, Gary.
Thanks, mate. The first thing I want to say is, how was West's Tigers just a little bit over a week ago? Last Sunday week, I think we were all so excited about the 2026 season.
Positive for the first time in a long time, Gary. Like, The changes over the past 12 months have been massive.
Yeah, and I felt that I'd had a very small part to play in that. I felt that, I'm not here today to in any way breach confidences around the review. I think that's really important to say. But I felt like we had a chance to reset this organisation in a way that was showing real results. And I could see us building on those results in a way that could still see if we can get on top of this in the top four and possibly a premiership. And to change all that in the space of a week, I struggle to understand. Now, one of the things I would say is I get to have a bit of a look on social media, and I see supporters of the Holman Barnes Group directors saying things like, well, we own 90% of West's Tigers, so, we can do what we want to do. And at one level, that's true. But at another level, it's never that easy. I'm the chairman of a couple of, large businesses, and you never are able to do just as you choose, even though you own it all. You've got regulators to report to. So as directors, you have responsibilities to the Corporations Act, and you want to be an employer of choice. You want people to want to work for you. And so when I've seen what's unfolded this past week, I ask myself, when Daniel Payton spoke in that initial video, which is hard to find now.
Yeah, it's disappeared.
And he said, because we were not getting clear information from that board, we dismissed the board. Is that a fair reflection of what happened and why it happened? Do the facts support that? Because Daniel, as a officer of the company, you got a responsibility to not just be truthful, but to be transparent.
And in that situation, Gary, as you've just said, you sit on a number of boards, you chair a number of boards yourself.
Mm-hmm.
If you had a lack of communication coming from parts of that board, would your first action be dismissal?
Well, that's another matter that I want to come to, which is, and I want to come back to the communication that Daniel initially put out shortly. But the other thing that I would say is a well-functioning organisation ensures that if there are matters that are of concern, communication happens two ways, both to the people who are causing the concern, but also receiving information from them to try to understand what's going on. So as an example, if there was an issue about the jersey, and now with the communications that have come out from Holman Barnes Group, I don't know if it was an issue or wasn't an issue because there's been differing comments from them now. When that jersey was approved, if it was approved in the board meeting of the West Tigers, were the Holman Barnes Group directors present? Was Dennis Burgess and Stephen Montgomery at the time present? If they were present, what was their vote? And then when the minutes of that meeting were then reviewed at the next meeting, did they ask for those minutes to be changed? Now that's one set of questions, but the next set of questions is Holman Barnes Group might still say, well, we weren't informed. Well, did their director
their
representatives provide any feedback to them? Was there anything of concern that was raised by Stephen Montgomery and Dennis Burgess? And then was there any feedback provided to the board directors of West's Tigers? Now, these are matters of fact. They're not matters of conjecture, I beg your pardon. And these are things I think deserve to be investigated. Now, the other thing I'd say is Daniel Payton, in his initial video, said that directors were terminated because of lack of communication. Now, you're talking about people like Annabelle Williams. Now, Annabelle is a extraordinary person, you know, a great lawyer out of a top law firm, a Paralympian, involved in Swimming Australia. You know, she's got an incredible resume. Now, to say that she did not communicate with you is a very serious matter.
And damaging.
Well, it puts her at question. So she has the right to have that question looked at. And if it's not true that that's the case, there should be a apology at least, and then there ought to be a question as to whether that means there's some other factors at play here, because that's not good behaviour, you know. And there's other directors as well who have been put in the same position. So that brings me to my next question, which is, let's say those statements are skirting being defamatory, you know, saying to people, you know, directors are not being communicated. You didn't communicate with us, therefore we terminated them. Who's going to pay for those defamation proceedings? Is that the Holman Barnes Group directors and Daniel personally? Will they take personal responsibility? Or will they ask the members of Holman Barnes Group, you know, West Ashfield and the like, to pay for those legal matters? When Rick Wade, a previous director who was suspended for multi-years, I can't remember.
8 years.
8 years, and he took the Holman Barnes Group to court, and there's recently been, it was in the paper, so I don't know any more than this.
Yeah,
there's been a settlement. Who paid for that settlement? Was that the members of Holman Barnes Group, or was it the Holman Barnes Group directors themselves? When coincidentally, the directors that were terminated, the coincidence being the directors that supported the initial review.
Correct. Including
Dave Gilbert, Australian cricketer, eminent sports administrator, when they were terminated, who paid for the advice that they received? Who paid for the advice and the people that turned up at the last AGM, the Clayton Utes legal firm? Who's paying for this? Is it the members or is it the individual directors? Julie Romero, she became the chair after those directors were moved aside, and recently she cops an 8-year suspension. Who's funding that? The advice and the protection of the Holman Barnes Group. So to me, these are questions that ought to be answered. Firstly, you've made really important allegations, Daniel Payton, against eminent people. Are they true? If they're true, what evidence do you have for them being true? And let's all see it. And if they're not true, will you apologise? And who's going to fund these matters if you don't apologise? This is not the way good organisations are run.
How do they get away with that, Gary? Because you talk about transparency and you talk about accountability, but it just seems that time after time after time, they make decisions based on their own agendas and aren't held accountable to that. Why has this happened time and time again, which has brought us to today, without that accountability being put in place previously?
Well, everybody's accountable. It's just when the organisation that you're accountable to steps in. And people are not currently as accountable as they might be at Holman Barnes Group because of the debenture system and the way it works. And Liquor and Gaming have had a look at Holman Barnes Group in the past, you know, and I think they've got a watching brief on them now, but their feeling is nothing has risen to the level that would cause them to step in. Okay, so be it. But you're still accountable to other people. If there's statements that are untrue, you're accountable to the law. and those matters should be addressed. But more than all of that, you're accountable to the people that work for you. At the end of the day, the Wests Tigers is a organisation that sits within Holman Barnes Group's orbit, and it's front office staff, it's the football department, it's the coach, it's the players. Your behaviour has an impact on all of them. And ultimately it has an impact on the integrity of the National Rugby League, because if you end up acting in such a capricious way that you bring the whole game into question, people should step in. So I think, and history shows, that people continue to behave in a way that they feel comfortable with until they finally hit an electric fence. And I think this week we've hit an electric fence. And I think it's now time to do something about it.
And we're at the point now where in the last 18 months, and it's been 8 directors across the Holman Barnes board, the Holman Barnes Group board and the West Tigers board that's been dismissed. 8 directors, including 3 of those were chairmen or chairpeople. Now, if the reports about Shane Richardson are right today, across those same 2 companies, it's 2 CEOs as well. That has to be cause for concern from people looking from the outside in at our club, and surely that's grounds to have a closer look at what's happening at our club.
I think that's part of the grounds, but I think the real grounds is this. For an organisation like Wests Tigers to be going as well as it had, it more profitable, bigger fan base, better social media interaction, higher merchandise sales, ticket sales, it goes on and on, to then put, frankly, a torpedo through it all.
And why would you blow that up right now?
Well, you can only speculate, but just staying with the point for a second, to put a torpedo through all of that and to use a lack of communication on the board as the reason for that, without any proof of any interaction about warnings and, hey, guys, you're just not quite doing all the right things, just displays shambolic behaviour, which in and of itself deserves some reaction.
So you talk about reaction, and I'll put my cards on the table. I'm disappointed today, and I'm happy to be proven otherwise and told that I'm incorrect. But I'm disappointed that if Shane Richardson has walked, as we're led to believe has happened, via the Chalmers, at the time of recording we don't have official word of that, but we're led to believe that's true. If he's walked, why hasn't the NRL, like Peter V'landys came out and said last week or through the week that he would not let down the West Tigers fans. He said that the West Tigers would always remain. That's reassuring. But he also said he wouldn't let us down. Now, we have possibly lost the best thing that's happened to this club in the last 5 years today. We've got other positives, but I'd argue that having Shane Richardson as CEO is the positive. In the close history. Why hasn't Peter V'landys jumped in, appointed administrator, and done everything he could to keep Shane Richardson, because that maintains or gives us some semblance of stability?
Yeah. So let me come to that in a second, but let me say first, I'm really upset as well. I really am. But what I'm trying to do here is stay above that, because we need cool heads and we need to find a way through this once and for all. And I've had the threats online. You've had the threats. Some of it's very unpleasant stuff. And so I just say to everybody, this is a contest of ideas we're on here. This is we're arguing about the best way to run a football club, So I'm trying to stay in that mental space. Now, I can't speak for Peter V'landys, but what I would say is in the past week, I think there have been accusations and counter-accusations. The first accusation was that you're not communicating with us clearly enough. The West Tigers board has come out to say we don't believe that to be the case. I understand there's been further accusations from the Holman Barnes Group. You only have to see their communications to see they keep opening up their concerns. We're now talking about Shane Richardson, an issue coming up. I've got to say, one of the most disappointing things of this whole saga is in 1 week you get the dismissal of the board, blow the whole show up, and in that same week, all of a sudden, there's an issue about Shane Richardson. That stinks. That stinks. From a chairman,
yeah,
I can tell you that is beyond coincidental, and as well as that, it just further displays shambolic behaviour. That in and of itself suggests to me we need to step in. Now, coming back to the NRL, they have the right and the obligation to make sure when they move they got all the facts. I have no doubt in my mind that's the position they're currently in. So I'll leave them to decide what they do, but what I would say is this Wests Tigers deserves the future that was being laid out in front of all of us.
Absolutely.
And for it to be lost like this is just a real shame, So I would call on the NRL and I would call on the Holman Barnes Group, in fact, to support the appointment of an administrator to manage and chair the board of Wests Tigers and to lead us through this time of uncertainty. I would also call on all parties to reinstate the board. I think those independent directors deserve that at the very least. What's happened to them is terrible. And on a personal note, right, I was involved in the review. I was keen to see Shane come into this organisation. I was some very small part of encouraging that. I was excited to see the independent directors and I met two of them at least and, encouraged them to continue to be part of this. I feel sick about that because I feel like I might have been involved in damage to their careers. And that's not great, So for all of those reasons, I think it's time for the NRL to appoint an administrator, and I think, frankly, the Holman Barnes Group should agree with that because they are concerned about matters of governance. Okay, if you've got no other hidden agenda, if that's all you're concerned about, let's get an administrator in place. Let's have an 18-month or 2-year hiatus while we have a eminent person work through that. Let's get back on track.
And if that was put to Holman Barnes and they didn't agree to it, what's the next step?
I think the NRL should just go ahead and do it.
And they can do that?
Oh, I can't speak for the NRL, mate. No. I can't speak for the NRL. What I can say is, as a matter of general principle, sporting organisations around the world who licence, bodies to play in their sport typically have a right of stepping in if an organisation's not adding to the overall sport. But short of that, I can't speak to it.
So moving forward, what can supporters, members, fans of our club do to kind of help in this situation? Like we've got a rally coming up this weekend.
Yeah. So, I think the first thing fans of the Wests Tigers should do is decide whether you're going to buy into this Magpie Balmain nonsense or not. I think this is not a Balmain matter. It's not a Magpie matter. It's a Wests Tigers matter. And for 25 years, 26 years, I've been a supporter of this club, and I have done some little things to try to help it along its way. My two daughters and I went to the 2005 grand final, and it remains one of our great memories. We went to the game the week before, which was even more fun, as I recall. They're great core memories for us. So the first thing I do is ask supporters to identify yourself as Wests Tigers supporters. When we come to rally, come in Wests Tigers gear. That's who we are. People from the Magpie side who try to pretend it's a Balmain matter and vice versa, if that's what's happening, buzz off. This is Wests Tigers. That's the first thing I call on. The second thing I call on is, if you want this club to succeed and if you want this club to continue, now's the time to stand up. This is as serious a matter as I've ever seen. And so what I ask is that everybody comes to that rally, the Wests Tigers rally, next weekend.
And we need to be really clear on this. A couple of hundred people is not going to cut it. We need people to...
A couple of hundred people will hurt us.
Yeah, we need...
We've got to get 1,000
plus.
5,000.
Yep.
We got to do what we do at Leichhardt Oval. We got to do what we do at Campbelltown. Fill the joint.
Yep.
Fill the joint. This is the other thing I got to say. Some of my best days are going the footy and the joint is full. Campbelltown, it's great fun, you know. I go to the beer shed behind Lamia Station and then end up at Campbelltown Stadium. Nothing better. Same at Leichhardt. You know, all the people who create that atmosphere, please come and support this club.
I really want to echo what Gary's saying here. This is the time to stand up for, not for Balmain, not for the Magpies. This is the time to stand up for the Wests Tigers. It's our club. We have to fight for it, because if we don't, it is going to be taken away from us. So please get out to Pratton Park at 10:30 a.m. on Saturday. Come in your Wests Tigers gear. Come, be loud, but let's get our club back. Let's get control of our club. Let's get the NRL in to support us, and let's get our club moving in the right direction.
And keep sharing this information. Get out there on social media, get out there amongst your friends and family, and share that 10:30 this Saturday, Pratton Park is the rally. As Gary just mentioned, it is so important, so important. Share. Get the information out there.
Before you go, Gary, I want to thank you. You say you've done a little bit to help our club. You've done way more than a little bit to help our club. The review you and Tony Crawford were involved in was game-changing for our club. The fact that the Homing Barnes group has thrown that away in the past week doesn't take anything else away from what you've done. So thank you for the way you stand up for our club and the way you fight for our club.
Thanks, mate.
Yeah, here, mate.
Thanks, guys.
Get out to Pratton Park.
Thanks.